Hello everyone, and thank you for joining in for this session. I hope you are all well. My name is Carla Sarwi-Kay. I'm a third-year PhD student at the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry University in the United Kingdom. I'm now reaching the end of my doctoral research and approaching the final discussion chapter of my thesis. And today I wanted to share with you some reflections and dilemmas. My presentation is entitled, What if resilience were not sustainable? And I'll explore apparent contradictions in evolving society-nature relationships in the Seereer Sin community in Senegal, West Africa. Senegal is bordered by Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, the Gambia, and the Atlantic Ocean in the west. The country has very distinct ecoregions, represented here with the different colors. On the map you can also see some wavy horizontal lines. Those are the isohyets for Senegal with their respective climate zones, and they have been quickly moving southwards during the past few decades as the country has become drier due to anthropogenic climate change. Right, so this was my starting point, Senegal and climate change. My research is based in a village called Ndiaman, near the coast with a community of the ethnic group Seereer Sin. I'm doing participatory action research with Group Mbogaif, a peasant group of women and their teenage children. During the very first meetings, they were clear that climate change is only but one of their challenges and that it cannot be studied alone. Instead, we decided to look at food systems, encompassing all their activities, from production, processing, packaging, distribution, retail, consumption, and disposal. Embracing their different scales, environmental, political, spatial, temporal, institutional, social, and economic. And their levels too. So for example, for the environmental scale, we looked at the field, the farm, and the wider ecosystem. The research team was interested in exploring Ndiaman's food system and assess how resilient it is. A simplified Sustainable Livelihoods framework from DFID 1999 looks at the vulnerability context, livelihood assets, here with 5 capitals, transforming structures and processes, livelihood strategies, and livelihood outcomes, and the links between all of these. We adapted this framework and created a resilient food system framework, looking at the context, the food system resources, 6 in our case, food system approaches, and food system outcomes, and the links between all of these. By the way, I'm happy to discuss this in more detail after the presentation. This framework enabled the research team to organize the 4 research questions that would help assess the social ecological resilience of the Ndiaman food system. First, what is the system's context? Looking at the past, locally and nationally, even globally. Second, how is the system defined and organized? Looking at resources. Here we look at ecological, physical, financial, human, sociocultural, and spiritual resources. Third, how does the system address this context? What approaches are adopted right now in Ndiaman? Questions 2 and 3 help understand the system's strengths and weaknesses. Finally, how social-ecologically resilient is the system? Here we look at the opportunities and threats at present and in the future for Ndiaman and its community. We also look at the links between all of these questions. This presentation, however, focuses mainly on research question 4. The theoretical framework adopted complemented the resilient food system framework with feminist political ecology because a strong emphasis was given to intersectionality. The research team comprised mainly people who are often marginalized from decision-making processes, i.e. women and youngsters. In fact, in the research, I refer directly to intersectional political ecology. The third key theoretical framework was traditional environmental knowledges, purposefully written in the plural to reinforce the idea of intersectionality and of plural subjectivities and plural knowledges. True participatory action research required the acknowledgement, respect, and engagement with local knowledges, especially from women and youngsters. The methods chosen reflect this engagement. We used hybrid methods with no hierarchy. Participatory video to engage the youth and enable the recording of knowledge sharing. archival research to understand Nyman's context and heritage, often from an exogenous point of view. Archives also included historical satellite imagery, focus group discussions and workshops, including visual methods such as drawings, or diagrams using local props, but also practical sessions such as cooking demonstrations. Informal and semi-structured interviews with key informants. Field visits led by female and male peasants. A survey to better understand the size and organization of the neighborhood. And autoethnography to reflect on my participant observation through note-taking and drawings. There are no perfect and complete methods. Each dataset has its silences and gaps, and triangulation is used here to help overcome trade-offs, to establish a conversation between the different methods, knowledges, intersubjectivities, and partial objectivities. So rather than focusing on climate change, discussion started from the observation that the community practices less farming, is less self-sufficient, and is now dependent on a monetized economy. Climate change is one of the causes for this assessment. It has caused serious droughts in the region in the past decades. But there is also a double exposure to imperialism and globalization, which have promoted deforestation and the adoption of unsustainable farming practices, which, with the droughts, have led to mass land degradation and ultimately to less farming, less homegrown food, and the consequent dependence on money to buy food. So what have villagers been doing to address this? Three main approaches were adopted. Small local entrepreneurship, which means people can earn some money while still living in the village. For example, selling livestock, which is mainly done by men. Trade with professions such as tailor, roofer, or taxi driver, mainly done by men. Shopkeeping, mainly done by men, whilst women might sell door to door or at school gates, for example. Collecting and selling wood, the main cooking fuel. Whilst women collect wood locally for their household needs, men may collect wood for sale. Collecting and selling straw to smoke fish in a nearby coastal town. Straw is collected by women and often sold by children. All of these approaches, though, reinforce the cycle of less work in the family fields, less self-sufficiency, and more dependence on the external economy. And the last two options greatly reinforce deforestation too. A different approach adopted consists of paid local seasonal work, which again enables villagers to earn money while still living in the village. But in this case, it is dependent on seasonal exogenous businesses. Men may work in a nearby farm producing out-of-season fruit to export to Europe, and women often work in a distant farm producing out-of-season spring onion and green beans, again for the European market. Finally, the third option is economic migration. Typically men leaving the village for extended periods of time, often leaving wives and children in the village, to work at the nearby fishing town, Mbour, or at the capital city, Dakar. These approaches have multiple consequences or outcomes. All of them mean there is less farming labor available, and therefore less farmland being used. So many villagers sell their farmland to get some income, conscious that otherwise unused land can be requisitioned by the state. But these outcomes reinforce the initial problem again. A different outcome is the increased external influences now arriving in the village, which lead to a progressive loss of tradition, and, villagers believe, to the loss of social connection and solidarity, therefore reinforcing the decreased farming, the loss of self-sufficiency with weaker support networks, and the increased dependency on the monetized economy. So when observing this whole process, it becomes clear that it is a vicious cycle, leading to long-term destruction, both ecologically because of unsustainable environmental approaches, and socially with approaches detrimental to food security and sovereignty. And villagers are the first ones to observe and to acknowledge this. Yet the community's short-term survival approaches ensure their connection to place and being. Yes, villagers are farming less, but they are still connected to the land and farming, albeit relying less on their own food and more on money to purchase food. Connection to the land, no matter how degraded, exhausted, abandoned, or deforested, is still a mark of place, and it means the villagers still feel peasants. It is the connection to the land, even if only by proxy for those who have migrated, that defines the group, their identity as peasants, as Seereer Sin peasants. Resilience is perceived by the group members, young and old, women and men, as the capacity to continue feeling Seereer Sin. And as such, though environmentally unsustainable and not sovereign, the food system is considered resilient, inasmuch as it is able to ensure people's identity. The future lies in faith, in time, and in life, with all its complexity and fluidity. By preserving their evolving identity, villagers believe in their social ecological resilience. I'd like to acknowledge the vital work of the Ndiaman research team in conducting this research, and my two academic supervisors, Michel Pambert and Stephanie Lemke. For more information, feel free to send me an email, or have a look at my website, cskagroecology.wordpress.com, which has a section dedicated to our participatory videos. Thank you very much.